The human warship was still running. Pursuit Captain Veth Anar had been watching it run for 6 hours, and in 6 hours it had done exactly 2 things. It had not accelerated, and it had not died. Both of these facts were becoming a problem. She stood at the forward sensor console of the ISK Relentless Claim, a Tharyn pursuit cruiser fast, purpose-built for exactly this, and she studied the contact feed with the particular attention of someone searching for a mistake she had not made yet. The target was designated Contact 7. It was a single human frigate, ISF hull classification, running at 71% of its listed maximum velocity through the outer lanes of the Veth Drift, a nebula corridor that stretched for 400,000 kilometers and narrowed at its deepest point to a channel barely wide enough for 3 ships abreast. The drift was ionized gas, charged particulate interference. It was not a place a prudent navigator chose. Contact 7 had chosen it. "It's losing power," said Sub-Officer Lease from the tactical station behind her. He was young, 22, and he said everything with the tone of someone concluding a logical argument. "The drive signature has dropped 4% in the last 90 minutes. At this rate of degradation, it will be fully disabled inside the drift before we have to close within weapons range." "It has been losing power at 4% per 90 minutes for 4 hours, Anar said. "That is not a degradation curve, that is a constant." Lease was quiet for a moment. "Could be a controlled bleed, managing a damaged drive plant." "It could be." She kept her eyes on the feed. "It is also a rate at which they will never fully stop." She was 28 years old, the youngest pursuit captain in the Tharyn Reach's 4th strike group, and she had run down 41 hulls in 3 years of active patrol. She understood the mechanics of pursuit. A faster ship chases a slower one until the slower one either stops or the pursuing ship closes range. What she had never encountered was a quarry that maintained a consistent, deliberate margin, not fleeing as fast as it could, not slowing into a stop, but moving at precisely the speed required to keep the Tharyn formation in motion without ever allowing them to close. The ISF frigate was not running from her, it was walking. "Fleet disposition," she said. 7 ships in formation, Lease confirmed. "We are 2,000 kilometers astern of the contact, 7-ship spread. The drift walls are narrowing. At current depth, we are committed, extraction would take 6 hours minimum." She had known that when she entered the drift. She had entered because the target was inside, and a pursuit captain did not let a target escape into a nebula corridor and report to her fleet commander that she had declined to follow. The drift was interference, yes. Ionized gas, electromagnetic noise. Sensor resolution at anything past 800 kilometers was unreliable. That was what made it a good place to run. It was also, she had been noting for the last 2 hours, a good place to lead someone. "I want a full passive sweep," she said. "Maximum range, everything the drift will give us. I'm not interested in Contact 7. I want to know what is in front of Contact 7. The passive sweep took 11 minutes. The drift's interference degraded the results significantly, smear and noise, readings she could not trust past 400 kilometers forward of the target. But at the edge of the sweep's reliable range, there was nothing. Open corridor, charged gas, rock outcroppings from the drift wall, the usual geological signature of a compressed nebula channel. She looked at the clean results and did not feel relieved. "How long has that frigate been active?" she asked. "Total operational time, not just today." Lease pulled the hull registry data. ISF Carrow Gate, commissioned 4 years ago, colonial patrol designation, outer marches. 4 years is young, she said. "What is the standard crew complement?" 61 rated for that hull class. "How many are we reading from the biosignature returns?" Lease ran the scan. The drift degraded those 2, but at 2,000 kilometers she had enough resolution. 18 confirmed, possibly as few as 15. 61 to 18. The Carrow Gate had left port with a skeleton crew. Anar stood very still and let that number settle into the pattern she had been building for 6 hours. A colonial patrol frigate, lightly crewed, running at a controlled speed through the worst sensor environment in the Veth approach corridor, losing power at a rate that was too consistent to be damage, maintaining a lead that was too precise to be desperation. It was deep inside the drift. It had been inside the drift before she entered, which meant the navigator had chosen this route before the pursuit began. The passive sweep showed nothing ahead of it. She had been chasing it for 6 hours. It had been in the drift, already running for at least 8. "Reduce pursuit speed by 20%, she said. Lees turned from his station. "Captain." 20% reduction. Widen the formation interval to 4,000 kilometers. I want more spacing between hulls. We'll lose ground on the target. I know. She turned from the sensor feed and looked at him directly. "Do it." He did it. The Tharyn formation slowed. The gap between the pursuit ships and the Carrow Gate widened from 2,000 kilometers to 3,000 to 4. The contact maintained its pace without variation. It did not accelerate when they slowed. It did not slow itself. It continued at exactly 71% of its listed maximum velocity, as though nothing had changed. As though it did not care whether they were close or distant, only that they were still following. Anar had run down 41 hulls. The 41 had all at some point done something, sped up when she closed, slowed when they were damaged, broadcast distress signals, attempted communications, turned to fight. They had been alive to the pursuit, reactive to the pressure of another ship behind them. Contact 7 had been entirely indifferent to her for 6 hours. She had never encountered a hull that was indifferent. She went to the navigation console and pulled up the drift's cartographic data, everything the Tharyn archives held on this particular nebula channel. It was not well mapped. The drift had low strategic value. It was a dead corridor, both ends terminating in open void with no inhabited systems at either mouth. Traffic was rare. The Tharyn patrols did not routinely enter it. That too was worth noting. She found it 40 minutes later, on the third review of the geological survey data. At the drift's deepest narrowing, the 400-kilometer bottleneck, 90,000 kilometers ahead of her current position, there was a notation in the survey record, 18 months old, flagged as low priority and never acted on. A gravitational anomaly reading, consistent with a large mass moving slowly through the corridor. The survey team had assessed it as a rogue asteroid cluster, catalogued it, and moved on. It was not moving. She checked the data against a second survey, 6 months old, taken from a different angle. The anomaly had not moved in 18 months. It was stationary. Very large, stationary masses in the middle of an otherwise clear nebula corridor were not asteroids. She felt it arrive in her chest before it reached her mind. The cold, particular certainty of someone who has just understood what the last 6 hours were for. "All ships immediate halt," she said. Her voice was completely level. The pursuit formation decelerated hard, 7 Tharyn cruisers bleeding velocity inside the drift channel. "Combat ready. All weapons live. Passive sensors to maximum, forward of our position." "Captain, the target is..." "The target is not the threat." She was already at the tactical overlay plotting the distance. They were 41,000 kilometers from the bottleneck. At full combat speed, the bottleneck was 22 minutes away. At the Carrow Gate's current pace, the Carrow Gate would reach the bottleneck in 19 minutes. It's a guide wire. It has been a guide wire for 6 hours. Whatever is sitting in that bottleneck, the Carrow Gate has been walking us toward it since before we entered the drift. Lees went completely quiet. She could hear the ventilation cycling in the silence. "What is the bottleneck's width?" she asked. 412 kilometers at minimum aperture. And our formation spread at current interval. He ran the calculation. 3 ships would fit through the aperture with adequate spacing. The remaining 4 would have to queue, 3 ships at a time, into a 400-kilometer channel, against whatever was sitting stationary on the other side. She looked at the Carrow Gate's contact return, still running ahead of her, still perfectly steady, still 19 minutes from walking into the throat of the thing it had brought her to. With 15 to 18 crew, aboard a 61-berth hull. She thought about what you could do with a skeleton crew, with the weight you saved by leaving 43 people behind, with the power you freed up by pulling most of your systems offline and running on a controlled bleed. You could carry something else instead. You could reconfigure the internal bays. A colonial frigate with an emptied crew complement and a repurposed cargo hold had a great deal of volume to work with. "What are the Carrow Gate's mass readings?" she said, "compared to standard displacement for its hull class?" Lise ran the scan. The drift interference made the returns noisy, but the number came back significantly high. The Carrow Gate was running at almost 140% of its standard operating mass. She stared at that number for a very long time. The human engineers who had crewed this ship had not been aboard to run it. They had been aboard to hold it together at exactly 71% velocity, bleed power at exactly 4% per 90 minutes, navigate it through exactly this corridor, for exactly this duration, and then deliver it, and the thing it was carrying, into the throat of a bottleneck where a Tharyn pursuit formation would arrive in formation, committed, with 6 hours of transit behind it and 6 hours of extraction ahead. 18 people had done this. "Full reverse," she said. "All ships, emergency reverse thrust, maximum power. We are extracting from the drift immediately." She watched the formation begin to turn. 7 pursuit cruisers in a 400-kilometer-wide channel, decelerating, the drift walls pressing close. Extraction would take 6 hours. She had already known that. She had entered because she had not wanted to report that she declined to follow. She was going to have to report it anyway. The Carrow Gate continued forward. It did not deviate. At 19 minutes, it reached the bottleneck. Her passive sensors, straining against the interference, caught something at the edge of their range as the human frigate passed through the aperture. A return, large, very large. The mass anomaly she had found in the survey data resolving for 3 seconds of clean reading before the drift's interference closed around it again. Not an asteroid, not a rogue mass. An ISF warship of a class she did not have on file, running cold and dark and completely still, waiting at the far end of the bottleneck for whatever arrived through it. The Carrow Gate had walked her formation to the door and then opened it. The warship on the other side had been in position long before the Tharyn formation ever entered the drift. It had been there, quiet, while she had spent 6 hours watching a frigate lose 4% of its drive output per 90 minutes at a rate too consistent to be damage. The entire 6 hours had been the question. The bottleneck was the answer. Her formation was still decelerating. The extraction run would take 6 hours. She watched the Carrow Gate's contact return disappear into the interference beyond the bottleneck, and she thought about the 18 people, the skeleton crew, the engineers, whoever they were, who had been asked to hold a loaded, gutted colonial frigate together at 71% velocity for the better part of a day, threading it through ionized gas and sensor interference, burning their drive plant at a carefully managed rate, in order to deliver a Tharyn pursuit force to a very specific place. She thought about the one whose job had been to navigate, to keep the pace, to not flinch when the sensor returns showed 7 Tharyn cruisers 2,000 kilometers behind them for 6 consecutive hours. She keyed her fleet channel, signal fleet command. ISK relentless claim contact report. She kept her voice flat and professional. The ventilation cycled. Contact 7 confirmed as deliberate lure. Tharyn pursuit element successfully walked into the Veth drift bottleneck approach. We did not reach engagement range. Extraction is in progress. Estimate 6 hours to drift mouth. She paused. I want to flag for the record that this formation entered the drift because the target entered it. The target was never evading. It was leading. The 18 crew of Contact 7 navigated this ship, under pursuit, through 400,000 kilometers of degraded sensor corridor, at precisely the speed required to keep us following for 6 hours and 11 minutes. Another pause. I have run down 41 hulls. I have never encountered a crew that used its own pursuit as the delivery mechanism. She closed the channel and turned back to the passive sensor feed. The drift walls were moving past the hull now, the extraction burn underway, the 6-hour transit grinding out in the slow reverse they should not have needed to make. Somewhere beyond the bottleneck, the warship that had been waiting there was still waiting. It would wait until the Tharyn Fleet Command decided whether to send a different formation, better prepared, with knowledge of what was in the drift's throat. She suspected the warship would be patient. The Carrow Gate, she noted, never once transmitted a hail during the entire 6 hours. Not a signal, not a warning, not a word. 18 crew, and not one of them had broken to say anything at all. They had just run. That was the whole of it. They had just run, at exactly the right speed, in exactly the right direction, and trusted that a Tharyn pursuit captain would do exactly what a pursuit captain did: follow. She had followed. The drift walls scrolled past, 6 hours back to the mouth. The extraction burn was clean and steady, and Pursuit Captain Veth Anar stood at her console and watched the interference return on every passive sweep she ran, and found nothing in front of her, and found nothing behind her except open corridor, and thought about the quality of patience required to navigate a loaded, gutted frigate at 71% velocity for 6 hours without saying a single word to the ships following you. She had been chasing 42 now. She had never been walked anywhere before.